Good evening, I'm Anna Kalczyńska and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Russia says it is ready to present a peace settlement memorandum to Ukraine on Monday, June the 2nd in Istanbul. And we'll have more on that in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. A strategic agreement reached between Germany and Ukraine. Polish presidential election near with neither candidate in a decisive lead. Chelsea London takes on Real Betis in Wrocław, UEFA Conference League final. Russia has proposed resuming peace negotiations with Ukraine, with the country's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov calling for a second round of direct talks with Kyiv in Istanbul. The proposed meeting, which will see both sides present their conditions for a ceasefire, is reportedly scheduled for June 2nd. After over a week of waiting, Russia says it's ready to present their peace settlement memorandum to the Ukrainian side, outlining what exactly it wants in exchange for a ceasefire as well as peace. The Russian delegation, led by negotiator Volodymyr Zelenskyy, would also provide, quote, necessary clarifications to the peace memorandum. According to Reuters, citing sources familiar with the negotiations, one of these demands is for the Western leaders to pledge in writing to stop enlarging NATO eastwards, a so-called grievance Russia has previously pointed towards as one of the reasons for invading Ukraine. The proposal for resuming peace talks came after a heated exchange between American and Russian officials on social media, started by US President Donald Trump, saying his Russian counterpart was, quote-unquote, playing with fire by neglecting the negotiations and threatening to tighten American sanctions on Russia. Germany is set to jointly produce long-distance weapons with Ukraine, announced German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, adding that there will be no restrictions on range. Berlin is committing not only to co-develop weapon systems, but also to finance critical battlefield infrastructure. The announcement came today during Volodymyr Zelenskyy's visit to Berlin. Is it the long-awaited shift in the German military support strategy for Ukraine? Sasha Farbach has the details.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy received the red carpet treatment as he arrived in Berlin. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz welcomed the Ukrainian president amid growing hopes in Kyiv that the new German government would step up its defense support. Soon after, the Chancellor announced plans to deepen military cooperation between the two countries.
Our defense ministers will sign a memorandum today on the procurement of Ukrainian-made long-range weapon systems, so-called long-range fires. There will be no range restrictions. This will enable Ukraine to fully defend itself even against military targets outside its own territory. This marks the beginning of a new form of military-industrial cooperation between our countries, one that has great potential.
Chancellor Merz has adopted a more assertive stance, aligning Germany with the tougher positions of allies like the UK and France. He stopped short of naming Taurus missiles directly. This may be because these long-range systems are capable of striking targets up to 500 kilometers, including inside Russia, though he emphasized the need for enhanced long-range capabilities. Still, analysts caution that such weapons are just one piece of a broader strategic puzzle.
You can't use the Taurus without American intelligence. It's, in other words, you can say I'm going to give the Taurus to Zelenskyy, but the fact of the matter is that it needs the guidance systems that are in the hands of Americans.
The government of Friedrich Merz, they want to keep things pretty much in limbo. They don't want to really talk about what's going to happen. I mean, they call that strategic ambiguity, which basically means that they don't want to tell the enemy.
During the Berlin talks, Germany also announced a €5 billion defense package for Ukraine, aimed at strengthening Kyiv's forces and countering Russian attacks. The move reflects growing cooperation and warm relations between Berlin and Kyiv. Experts point to a shift compared to the previous government in Berlin.
When Friedrich Merz was in Kyiv not too long ago, earlier this month, it was visible that he has a good relationship with Zelenskyy, that they get along well, the two of them, that Merz is other than Olaf Scholz, is not slow and always hesitant when it comes to committing Germany to supporting Ukraine.
Energy was also discussed as Chancellor Merz made it clear his government would be against Nord Stream 2 in any form.
I say on behalf of the Federal Republic of Germany that we will do everything in this context to ensure that Nord Stream 2 cannot be put back into operation.
Despite Merz's strong statement, experts caution what lies ahead, as there may be interests even within Germany, which would aim to restart Nord Stream 2.
But again, we will see many more attempts, maybe even encouraged by some people in the United States, to nevertheless activate Nord Stream 2. But it's not going to happen as long as Merz is Chancellor.
Some of his fellow colleagues here in Germany, there is the Prime Minister of Saxony, Michael Kretschmer, who just the other day he was saying, well, why don't we put Nord Stream 2 back into operation, and it's going to help our economy. We get cheap gas again from the Russians.
Overall, the visit highlights how Chancellor Merz is shaping up to be a very different leader than his predecessor, steadfast and determined to support Ukraine, even if progress isn't as rapid as Kyiv hopes. With this firm commitment, Merz is setting a new course that could redefine Germany's role and Ukraine's future. Sasha Farbach, TVP World.
As the two presidential candidates in Poland are still neck and neck amid a heated campaign, the current favorite doesn't necessarily have to be the actual winner. With centrist Rafał Trzaskowski and Eurosceptic Karol Nawrocki heading to the runoff vote on Sunday, the U.S. administration is doubling down on its support for the conservative candidacy of Navroski. But will it give him an edge or be a political kiss of death? Kazimierz Łysiak reports.
Pro-EU, pro-NATO Rafał Trzaskowski from the ruling coalition or Eurosceptic anti-Ukrainian Karol Nawrocki backed by the conservative opposition. One of these two will be the next president of Poland, and the race couldn't be any tighter. According to the latest opinion poll, the mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, now has a small lead over Navroski, but with such small margins, the election could go either way. As the vote draws near, both candidates are trying to gather as much support as they can, and Navroski, who is backed by the right-wing Law and Justice Party, has just got an additional endorsement from the US administration.
I just had the opportunity to meet with Karol, and listen, he needs to be the next president of Poland. Do you understand me?
This endorsement from the US Homeland Security Secretary is only part of a larger approach of President Trump and his advisors to European elections. He previously supported the far-right AfD in Germany and the nationalist Romanian AUR. In both cases, the endorsements proved to be ineffective. Will it work in the case of Poland?
Even though Poland is very pro-American, I doubt that anyone from Trump administration, including Donald Trump, can dictate to Poles who should be the next president.
In an effort to double down on that support, Republican congressmen have sent a letter to the European Commission alleging the government in Warsaw is playing dirty in the election.
Reports of foreign-funded political ads favoring Rafał Trzaskowski, the Civic Coalition candidate backed by Prime Minister Donald Tusk, that may have occurred in contravention of Polish law, combined with the Tusk government's reported months-long refusal to comply with court orders to release public funding to the opposition Law and Justice Party, suggests a deliberate effort to tilt the electoral playing field.
But according to a legal scholar from the University of Warsaw, some of the accusations included in the letter are based on still unverified reports, while others are just plain false.
Every party, in order to gain the subsidy from the state budget, they need to submit the financial reports, and should the Electoral Commission state that there are some irregularities in the report, they are entitled not to accept this report. And that is precisely the reason why the subsidy has been taken away from the Law and Justice Party.
The staff of Rafał Trzaskowski has so far refused to comment on the letter or Kristi Noem's endorsement of the conservative candidate. and that silence could be intentional.
The current government is not on the best terms with the Trump administration in general. So for Trzaskowski, it's better to say quite ambiguously how he's going to keep good ties with American administrations. Any Polish government should, and any Polish president should, but at the same time, he shouldn't get into details.
But if there is one thing Washington and Warsaw do get along about, it's defense spending. Poland continues to be the biggest spender in all of NATO percentage-wise, with close to 4.7% of its GDP allocated to security. And that is unlikely to change, regardless of who becomes president after the vote on Sunday. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
And just 4 days away from the presidential runoff in Poland, emotions are heating up. It seems like every day new scandalous details are emerging. Karol Nawrocki is facing allegations of involvement in illegal and shady acts in his youth and beyond. More on the law and justice candidate from Ovidiusz Nicieja.
From using nicotine pouches on live TV during the presidential debate to his dark past, including alleged ties to criminals and hooligan fights, Karol Nawrocki's campaign has been stained by ongoing scandals and allegations. The Eurosceptic candidate Karol Nawrocki has a PhD in history and heads Poland's State Institute of National Remembrance. But the revelations which surfaced during the 2025 campaign raised questions about Nawrocki's integrity and fitness for presidency. According to anonymous sources cited by the Polish news outlet Onet, the presidential candidate arranged sex workers for guests of one of the hotels in the Polish sea resort Sopot when he worked there as a security guard. Navroski has denied these allegations and filed a slander lawsuit against the outlet. What Nawrocki does not deny, however, is his football hooligan past and participation in hooligan fights. In a recent interview, the conservative candidate has called such fights sportsmanlike, noble combat.
I took part in various fights, always sportsmanlike, noble combat. I did not always emerge victorious, because the sport, like any other, requires determination and preparation.
Karol Nawrocki is also involved in a number of housing scandals. In 2017, Karol Nawrocki became the owner of a government-owned low-income apartment owned by an elderly man with issues. Opponents claim that he swindled the elderly man, while Nawrocki and his supporters claim that he helped him. More recently, Gazeta Wyborcza reported that while leading the Museum of the Second World War in Gdańsk, Nawrocki stayed over 200 nights free of charge in a guest apartment intended for visitors. He claimed it was used for meetings, COVID quarantine, and diplomatic purposes. According to a recent report by Poland's Supreme Audit Office, Nawrocki, as head of the Institute of National Remembrance, spent some €7 million, quote, in violation of the law, in an unintentional, dishonest, or uneconomical manner. Nawrocki and his campaign have dismissed many of the allegations, emphasizing his repeated security clearance for handling classified information. However, Polish media reported that in 2021 his clearance was initially denied over financial and trust concerns, but later approved due to political pressure. The Law and Justice Party stands by its candidate despite his past. Now the decision whether he is fit for the office will be decided by the voters. For TVP World, Ovidiusz Nicieja.
Facing rising geopolitical tensions, the European Union announced a new plan to bolster military infrastructure around the Black Sea. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, made the announcement in Brussels, adding that the project also includes building a special hub and an early warning system to monitor the region against underwater attacks. Our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins, has more from the Belgian capital.
The Black Sea is important for Europe, but with attacks under its water and above its airspace increasing, the EU wants to do something about securing that area. This is exactly why they handed down a Black Sea strategy on Wednesday. This includes a range of initiatives such as upgrading military mobility infrastructure to the establishment of a Black Sea maritime security hub, but it also will have an impact on the EU's enlargement process. Let's take a listen to the High Representative Kaja Kallas on why this strategy is so important for the bloc.
The feel of geopolitical shifts is there. Ukraine and Moldova are moving toward membership of the EU, Georgia too, if it returns to the EU path, and Turkey is a vital partner and a candidate country. But the region's potential is marred by Russia's war, reoccurring airspace violations, and attacks on ports and shipping lanes highlight this.
Now, this strategy is a clear indication that the EU wants to stabilise some of those murky waters, but questions remain regarding when these initiatives will hit the ground running, particularly where that maritime security hub will be based. We also would like further clarification on how this will assist Ukraine as it wards off another year of Russian aggression, but we will have to wait for that official ribbon-cutting ceremony. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
Representing the European Union, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski travelled to Colombo on Wednesday for a 4-day visit aimed at strengthening ties between Sri Lanka and the bloc. In Sri Lanka's capital, Sikorski met with his counterpart, Vijita Herath. The two officials discussed Sri Lanka's relations with the European Union. Poland currently holds the rotating EU presidency, and Colombo is hoping that Sikorski's visit will aid Sri Lanka's push to retain the EU's generalized scheme in Preferences Plus, which provides developing countries special incentives for sustainable development and good governance. On Thursday, the second day of his visit, the Polish foreign minister will meet with the Sri Lanka president and prime minister for talks. During his trip, Sikorski will also deliver a lecture at the Lashman Kardigamar Institute on Poland's political transformation. The Czech government condemned China for carrying out a cyber attack against its foreign ministry, exposing thousands of unclassified emails. According to Czech Foreign Minister Jan Lipavsky, China has long worked to undermine democracy in the country. Is it the first time the Czech government has attributed a national cyber attack to a state-backed actor? Now, more from Natalia Komarov.
The Czech Republic has accused Chinese state actors of conducting a long-term cyber attack on the country's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, gaining access to its internal communications.
China is interfering in our society through manipulation, propaganda, and cyber attacks. I summoned the Chinese ambassador to make it clear that such hostile actions have serious consequences for our bilateral relations.
Thank you very much. The operation is believed to have started in 2022, when Czech Republic held the presidency of the Council of the EU.
Apparently, the Chinese were able to read messages of the Czech foreign ministry during the presidency, which, of course, very likely included more sensitive information and messages than would have been sent without the presidency taking place.
Another possible motive for Beijing targeting Prague is its strong relationship with Taiwan.
They sent a delegation of a significant portion of the lower house of the legislature of the Czech Republic to Taiwan last year. So what China is really after is gaining support for the idea that China and Taiwan will ultimately be reunified, as that is one of the major goals of Chinese foreign policy generally.
The EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kaja Kallas, issued a statement in solidarity with Prague.
In recent years, malicious cyber activities linked to this country and targeting the EU and its member states have increased. In 2021, we urged Chinese authorities to take action against malicious cyber activities undertaken from their territory. Since then, several member states have reported similar attacks.
The Czech Republic has determined that a group called Advanced Persistent Threat 31, or APT-31, which is associated with the Chinese Ministry of State Security, was behind the attack. The same group was also implicated in cyber espionage campaigns against the UK and US.
And of course, with Chinese ambitions growing, so will also our capabilities to defend ourselves need to grow, because China is definitely ambitious, and it has, whether we like it or not, some of the best hackers and spies at its disposal.
The Chinese embassy in Prague has expressed, quote, strong concern and decisive disagreement with the accusations. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Some 70,000 people are expected in the southwestern Polish city of Wrocław today to root for their teams in the final of the UEFA Conference League, Europe's third best club competition. Spain's Real Betis and England's Chelsea London will compete for the trophy, but the atmosphere of competition propelled some of the fans to turn violent. Our reporter Piotr Miszczuk is in Wrocław and has this report.
We saw some clashes yesterday. A small group of Chelsea fans and a small group of Real Betis fans threw bottles and garden chairs at each other. The police had to intervene to contain the situation. And today we had a similar situation. The police had to use water cannons to appease the crowd. Some 2,000 extra police troops were deployed to this event. But those situations were happening in the city centre. The situation in front of the stadium is very calm and peaceful. But the emotions are running high. Chelsea seem to be favourites in this match. Their team is worth over 5 times more than that of Real Betis. But what the outcome of the game will be, it's uncertain. For TVP World from Wrocław, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
And now we take you to the latest news. Let me remind you, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Russia is ready to present a peace settlement memorandum to Ukraine on Monday, June 2, in Istanbul. This comes amid reports that Putin demands a NATO expansion freeze in exchange for a Ukraine peace deal. To discuss this step, as well as Europe's arming of Ukraine, I'm joined in the studio by Wojciech Przybylski, Editor-in-Chief, Visegrad Insight. Good evening, and thank you for coming.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So, I don't know, perhaps pressured by the latest angry comments by US President Donald Trump, the Russians make another offer, and the price for the peace would be the freeze of NATO expansion to the east. What do you make of it?
No, it's only a window dressing. In the old times, it took us some time. I mean, it took the West some time to understand that when it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, says it's not a duck, it's a Russian duck. And similarly here, we have lots of talk about peace, offer, deals, and a number of useless comments that are backed by zero action. Russia, on the day it was also having talks with Ukraine a number of times, have at the same time launched terrorist attacks against Ukrainian cities. Its war machine is producing more and more drones. Schools are training drone operators at the level of high schools so that kids at schools are trained killers for the potential offensive, not just against the Ukraine. It's not about Ukraine. It's against the West, and primarily it's against the US. It is undermining US dominance in the world. It is undermining US leadership in the free world. And I'm sorry to say, but in the light of what Donald Trump has tweeted on or posted on Truth Social, that he's been defending Putin's Russia from consequences, from dire consequences. It seems like it's only a very opportune president for the plan that Putin has all along, and he's very deliberate and consequential in its execution, which is destruction of the West and destruction of the United States.
Exactly. And the White House has so far resisted any pressure, any steps to pressure Moscow. So what do you think that the US position could be this time in Istanbul?
Well, the US position should be no talks without meaningful action. US should talk to Russia once Russia shows that it really means to talk. I mean, it should take example from its prime time in the Cold War. Ronald Reagan, when he was discussing negotiating with Russians, finally, after pressing them hard, he got what he wanted, but only because he was pressing Russia hard. You cannot initiate discussion without pressing your adversary, your enemy, someone who defines and means you means only bad things to you. And again, I do not mean Ukraine alone. I mean the whole West and the US in particular. You cannot talk to them and say, oh, we want to have an honest talk and we will defend you against the bad things that may happen to you. You need to carry a big stick. And the US has many big sticks. It's just unable to comprehend this is how you deal.
Unwilling.
Unable, unwilling. That this is how you deal with this kind of behavior.
Exactly. So another empty promise on the part of Kremlin, right? Aiming at prolonging the war and the status
I'm sorry. I'm past commenting what Russia says. They're throwing a lot of cheap talk that has meaningless statements inside. There is no point in analyzing what they say. I'm waiting for Russia to act differently, and then we can talk. But so far, we can talk about victims in Ukraine, people killed in their homes, on the streets. We see people who had no aggression against Russia, and they are being either killed, kidnapped, injured. There are multiple, people are terrorized, and yet they are defined. They are defined because they also know their history. And they know what Russia is doing to people when they surrender. And this is never a good story for any of the people who have surrendered to Russia and to Russian imperial ambitions. So these are only the lessons we have carried through the centuries and we can offer to the United States from Poland, from Ukraine. So US should better learn.
So another actor steps in. I mean, Germany right now, Friedrich Merz has said today in Berlin that Berlin would seek to jointly co-sponsor and co-develop new long-range weapons that could strike deep inside Russia with no limits whatsoever. So do you think that Merz is just approaching the much-visited crossroads of history? Is he able to take this very important step to help Ukraine?
Well, he's definitely going much further than the previous chancellor. Germany is behaving now as a constructive partner. Let's hope this is not too little too late. This is also very important. The timing is here, everything. The leadership is also about timing, and Germany might have missed its moment to lead. I hope that Merz is actually filling the void left by his predecessors to act decisively and to deliver to Ukraine what Ukraine needs, which are means of protection, their skies, that has been demanded from the very beginning.
The meeting that we are just observing here, the red carpet, could be a missed opportunity. Some expected that perhaps Merz, during this visit of Zelenskyy in Berlin, would announce the sending of Tauruses, long awaited by Ukraine. But it never happened. Only this morning in this very studio I informed that German Chancellor backtracked from his plan. So do you think it's a strategic ambiguity, as some say, or is it something more? What actually stops and prevents Merz from sending Tauruses to Ukraine?
I hope I am wrong, but I think it also is limited capacities. Germany can help, and it can, at a given moment, help immensely by what it just did, also by transferring resources, financial means for Ukraine to produce their own weapons. This is a lesson followed from Denmark, who initiated, the Danish government initiated a transfer of funds to produce weapons by Ukraine instead of producing more expensive and more difficult logistically to transport to Ukraine, taking longer roads, weapons that Ukraine needs. So a transfer of funds from Germany to Ukrainian military and defense, that is probably the most efficient help that Germany can provide today. And of course, there are some systems and logistical support that Germany can provide, but the biggest thing that Germany could do as a favor to Ukraine, the rest of Europe, is to work hard on Germany's defense posture. The willingness to fight, the willingness to defend not even all of Europe, but Germany's willingness to fight their own country. This is something that needs to be changed, and the Chancellor, along with the government, with the political elites, establishment, but also people who are leaders, authorities beyond politics in Germany, like in many other countries, have to develop much stronger. The willingness to fight, the resolve to resist, to defend the country, and actually to muster some military training, and to have the society on board. Currently, Germany is failing on that. So these promises and these deliveries that
Bundeswehr said that would be operational in 2029.
Bundeswehr should say all these good things, and I keep fingers crossed for that they do. The challenges are in our societies. Our societies, including German society, they are declaring, and this is by a Gallup poll, for instance, last year, that they are unwilling to defend, in majority, unwilling to defend their own country. So this is a problem all across Europe. Germany is the most acute problem of all in terms of societal response to that kind of question. And in terms of providing long-term resolve to defend ourselves, and by definition, defending ourselves today means helping Ukraine, this is deterrence to Putin. This is the true deterrence, also the will to fight, the will to defend Europe. And when Putin does not see that resolve, he continues the onslaught on Ukraine, because he knows he will undermine and he will build up this appeasement, pacifism in the Western societies further. So that is something we need to work on really hard, not just in Germany, in all other countries as well.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Wojciech Przybylski, Editor-in-Chief, Visegrad Insight. And last but not least, if you're looking for more about the Polish presidential election and an in-depth analysis of how and if Trump's endorsement could impact the vote, stay with the VP World for On the Record, coming right up. Thank you for being with us.